Ooh, some more Roald Dahl source material, you say? Where do I sign up? Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and yes, that's right, this is another brand new movie review. And today we are looking at the new exclusive feature that just hit HBO Max over the weekend, The Witches. Produced and directed by the one and only Robert Zemeckis. It also has names like Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso Cuarón attached as producers. Starring Anne Hathaway, Octavia Spencer, Stanley Tucci. And it's based off of the novel of the same name by Roald Dahl, who, you know, he's only one of my favorite authors growing up. But that is a stacked list of talent I've just given you behind this film. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let's just go ahead and talk about the story real quick. Those of you who've read the book like me will know it's the exact same story, but what the heck, I'll be nice. This is set, of course, in late 1967. A young orphaned boy goes to live with his loving grandma, played by Octavia Spencer, in the rural Alabama town of Demopolis. As the boy and his grandmother encounter some deceptively glamorous but thoroughly diabolical witches, she wisely whisks them away to a seaside resort. But there's a catch. They arrive at precisely the same time that the world's Grand High Witch, played by Anne Hathaway, has gathered her fellow cronies from around the globe, undercover, to carry out her nefarious evil plan. And this is also the second attempt at adapting this novel into film form after the film that was released in the 1990s. Hit the market, and in my opinion, that film just doesn't exist. Gross. So, apologies that this review is a little bit on the later side. I finally got a chance to check this out. I was just on a trip over the weekend. But this is one I absolutely could not miss. Of course, adapted from the famous novel by Roald Dahl, who has written some batshit insane stuff. And also some of the equally insane movies that have been produced out of it. As a fan, I needed to see this. And I've been seeing so much negativity surrounding this thing. A lot of people have hated this one. They're hailing The Witches as a complete disaster, super cheesy, they hated every second of it, terrible CGI everywhere. Just an unbearable time watching a film. And I'll be honest, guys, I don't get it. I don't get all the hate surrounding this movie. I actually had a really good time watching The Witches. Now, I know. It's not the greatest movie, admittedly. So before you start adding me down in the comments, just allow me to explain why I probably enjoyed this film more than you did. Well, for starters, I think this movie is directed really well, and really, how much farther do I need to go into that? It's Robert Zemeckis, the man behind some of my all-time favorites, Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, and the film is shot really well too. And I love the production design, the costumes, really cool. The grandeur of this hotel also, oh my gosh, such a cool looking place. Now, I did notice there were a couple of moments in the editing that were kind of clunky, but as far as technicals and direction goes, this is another solid outing from one of the greats. These performances also, oh my gosh, Octavia Spencer. Now granted, I feel like she's playing more her type here, but she does it super well. And so much sass from her in certain moments too. My goodness, she kills it. Stanley Tucci plays the hotel concierge, and he's perfectly solid for the material he's given. And he plays pretty much the straight man of the group, playing against all the bonkers stuff happening in his hotel. But I love the intensity he adds to certain moments, and also just the way he sells all the situational comedy that comes about. I think his performance in this movie especially is going to be often overlooked. I think it's going to be very underrated. Very solid. Also, Chris Rock. I had no clue he was in this movie. Granted, it's not for very long. He basically serves as the narrator, the older version of this main child. And I think his casting is actually pretty on point, because hearing Chris Rock as the first voice in this movie kind of establishes what this movie is. Just some good old-fashioned fun. Speaking of fun, I gotta talk about Anne Hathaway. She was just so much fun to watch. She is throwing her freaking all into the Grand High Witch. She has gone completely deranged for this role, and personality-wise, I think she captures that essence of the Grand High Witch beautifully. But she is actually where my issues begin with the witches. There were times where I felt like the gimmick went a little too over the top. Maybe that was the whole point of this character, but what I mean by that is that she's the villain. There were times where she comes off very menacing, sure. And then there were other instances where I was just kind of looking at her and I just wasn't buying her as a threat at all. This isn't a knock on Anne Hathaway at all. I think she's absolutely wonderful. But, I mean, Oh boy, this movie's gonna be polarizing, ain't it? Because yeah, okay, let's get to it. The elephant in the room. A lot of people have heavily panned The Witches, I've noticed, for the really crappy CGI. And yeah, a lot of it is very distracting. If you thought The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl had horrible CGI back in the year 2005, oh, you had no idea what was hitting you 15 years after. Yep, this is gonna be appearing in my nightmares tonight. Guaranteed. Thank you, Robert Zemeckis, for doing that. And a lot of that horrible CGI involves Anne Hathaway's character. And without spoiling anything too hard, let me just put it this way. Imagine if Heath Ledger's Joker. Remember how Heath Ledger's Joker had those scars around his mouth so that he's always smiling? Yeah, imagine if Heath Ledger was talking in The Dark Knight, as he usually does, and those scars moved along with him as he talked the entire time. Yeah, how distracting would that be? The answer is about as distracting as The Witches in some cases, and my god, is that as terrifying as it... Now, not all of the CGI in The Witches is that level of atrocious. I think the stuff with all the mice looks fine. I think they're very convincing. I think the young actors also do well with all their material in this film, and they sound like they're having a ton of fun with it. And I actually had a lot of fun with all the chase sequences involving all these mice. Felt very, very Roald Dahl. But feeling very Roald Dahl is actually where I get into another issue with this film that I don't think enough people are talking about. I noticed that there were a lot of inconsistencies in the screenplay in terms of character arcs. Just to give you guys an example, and yes, this is a mild spoiler. Now, the main kid in this movie, around the halfway point or so, I want to say, he goes through a drastic personality shift that's explained really in only one sentence. And you could have honestly made a whole movie out of that personality change. Now, I think these inconsistencies have something to do with the fact that this is based off of a novel. And of course, this is a shortened screenplay. It's not going to include every last little detail about the novel. And that's not just the case with this movie. Just look at all these big movies that are based off of novels. None of them really include every single last little detail. I think that personality shift was something the screenplay could have focused a lot more on, though. And then the kid just explains the change in one sentence and it's just like, oh, okay, let's move on. Yeah, it was just very, very glossed over. And I needed a little bit more explaining as to why he was the way he was. But yeah, despite my nitpicks with it though, I honestly don't understand all of the hate that this movie's getting. It is certainly not a terrible, complete disaster like people are claiming it to be. It's fun, and I think it's a very easy watch around this time of year. There's just enough scares to get you by, but there's still a lot of family-friendly fun to be had. I'm gonna give The Witches a B-. And that was one other thing I forgot to mention. Hour and 45-minute runtime, and this movie flew by. Now, I did have tons of fun with this one, but at the same time, despite what I've just said, I completely understand the naysayers. If they think the CGI is just too distracting for them and the performances are too over the top, I understand. I'm not gonna hold it against you if you hated The Witches, but I personally didn't. And if you guys haven't seen it, I'd at least recommend sitting through it once. Give it a shot. I mean, you might like it. It's available right now on HBO Max, and if you guys are big fans of Roald Dahl and all the batshit insane stuff he's come up with, I think this one's gonna be right up your alleyway. Have you guys seen The Witches? Do you guys enjoy it? Do you not? I would love to hear all of those thoughts down in the comments section below, and I would love to discuss them with you guys further. And if you guys are enjoying my content and you guys want to see more from me, please consider hitting that subscribe button down below as hard as you possibly can so you guys can stay in the loop as soon as any one of my new videos hits. And hey, if you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a thumbs up on your way out. I'd really appreciate that. Of course, as always, look forward to more fun content hitting the channel very, very soon, including my final 2 releases into the Halloween series. Once again, here's your hint. We're going Stephen King with those 2. Thank you guys so much once again for tuning into the video and your support of the channel so far. You guys are awesome. With all that being said, back talk, commence.